Welcome back to Dirt Obsession. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than what we usually do. This comparison between the Honda Rubicon and the Polaris Sportsman was a project we started in the early part of the year for ATVonDemand, but we ended up scrapping it due to time constraints in favor of the individual test videos. Those full test videos are available on ATVonDemand's YouTube channel, so be sure to check those out if you're interested in either one of these machines. This video is going to be much more raw than something we would produce for a professional publication, but I think you'll find some good information that'll help you make a decision between the budget-friendly Sportsman or the rugged and durable Rubicon. I'm probably going to leave in some of the more underdeveloped thoughts in the interviews that wouldn't typically make the cut, but I promise to provide further explanation whenever necessary. If we leave any questions unanswered about how these machines compare to one another, please hit us up in the comments. Before we start, a couple of admin notes. We did have the 450 Sportsman, but if you're considering the 570, I think a lot of the points that we're going to make would go for the 570 as well. The Rubicon actually compares better to the 450 Sportsman in terms of power, because the 450 Sportsman displacement is about 499 cc's, with the Rubicon at around 520 cc's, and they have similar horsepower numbers, somewhere in the mid-30s. When we're doing tests and reviews of machines, we start by getting to know the machines like any other buyer would, by doing walkarounds and pointing out the things that we like and don't like. Sometimes we get nitpicky, but it's really all with the intent of pointing out observations and not necessarily pointing out deal-breaking details. Sometimes we catch these things on camera and they were never intended to make it into the test video. It's more to remind ourselves to include it in the narrative when writing the scripts for the final test. But today you're going to see some of those clips. Just walking around these machines, one of the things we noticed as a significant difference, at least for a trail riding perspective, is placement of that rear brake. As you can see, you kind of have to lift your foot on the Sportsman to apply it. You leave it where that heel guard is and reach your toe up to hit the rear brake. Not really, right?
Riding boots. No.
Yeah, kind of in an awkward position for applying it without lifting your foot out of the footwell. Both machines have a comfortable riding position. The digital display on the Sportsman's a little bit easier to see. That is the same display that's on all of Polaris's ATVs and some of their side-by-sides. It's bright, it gives you a lot of information, and it's definitely easier to read. Compare that to the Honda, and you can read the gauge, but it is definitely a lot smaller. May or may not be an issue for some of you. The handlebars themselves on the Honda also feel like they're a little bit closer together. Again, not really an issue by any stretch of the imagination, but it does make for a different ergonomic feel. The steel racks on the Rubicon are another thing we like. The front bumper into the steel racks, a little bit of storage that we've shown you on the test, and then steel racks on the rear as well. The racks on the Sportsman are plastic. The front racks are a little bit flimsier, but we do like the rack extenders. That's definitely going to help for cargo, and that comes standard even on the non-EPS version. Well, the first thing that sticks out on the Sportsman is that it is a very plush and comfortable ride. It's very, very plush. It's almost soft. It is pretty soft. But for this kind of casual trail riding, it feels really good. To show you a comparison, here's the Viking on the same stretch of trail. You can see the ride on the Rubicon is a little choppier and a little bumpier due to the stiffer suspension. And that definitely aligns with what we were experiencing. The power is good. It's got about 33 horsepower, 499 cc's of displacement. It'll probably, trail riding wise, do just about anything you'd ever need it to do. It's certainly not a powerhouse like our Chase vehicle, which is the Sportsman XP 1000. It's not a 1000cc ATV, but you can keep a pretty good trail pace. You can keep a really good trail pace. The Rubicon's power felt very similar to the Sportsman 450, which is what we expected with the similar displacement. But keeping the Rubicon's RPMs right was a little more challenging with the manual foot shift. We'll touch more on that point later.
One thing I noticed on the Sportsman is whenever you first set on the machine, my knee's into the gear shifter, which is kind of aggravating when it's in park, but once you get it up into gear, it's not a big deal. It gets out of the way. So
it was weird adjusting to the Rubicon at first. The Sportsman EPS provides more assistance, so twistier trails are a little easier, and it feels a lot more nimble. But the manual transmission on the Honda was not what I was expecting at all. We thought the foot lever, instead of the push-button shifting on the Honda, was going to make it feel sportier, but the truth is it didn't. With Honda's auto clutch, any sportiness in shifting gears is removed, so the push-button shifting probably would have worked just as well. That was a disappointment, but it wasn't a deal breaker. We still had a lot of fun on the Rubicon.
I think both of these machines are kind of underrated as trail machines. They really are pretty fun. I'm in about 4th gear now, and it's a little spirited. You know, it's no big bore, but pretty fun. Nice little mud hole.
There's a big difference between Honda's transmission and a continuously variable transmission, also referred to as a belt drive. This is one of the defining differences between these machines, and we'll explain our experience with both later on in the video. The Viking made the mistake of giving me a shot idea here, but shout out to the Viking and Flying Brian. They were really good sports about smashing mud puddles and getting soaked, even in mid-January.
With the auto clutch, you don't have to worry about this bogging down in the wrong gear or anything. I'm still in 4th gear right here. I should shift down. I can shift down, but I just kind of want to see how it lugs. And it lugs really easily. So I think the Honda transmission is just kind of something that you have to get used to a little bit. And the more I get used to it, the more I like it.
The factory tires aren't bad on either of these machines. These are 6-ply rated. They kind of look like Carlisle's, but they're branded as Polaris, versus these Maxxis, also 6-ply rated tires on the Rubicon. For this slick stuff, they both have plenty of grip. If I had to choose one tire or the other, like if I were making an aftermarket purchase, it would definitely be the ones that are on the Honda. They have a little bit more aggressive tread pattern, a little bit sturdier lugs, and they seem to be hooking up really well in this wet and tacky environment that we're in today. All right, guys, so we spent a little bit of seat time on both the machines now, and we want to talk a little bit about power steering. Brent, the difference between the power steering between the two machines, what are you noticing?
the Sportsman has quite a bit of assistance on the power steering, which comes in handy for the tight trails, the tighter wood sections. The Honda is a little stiffer, so faster trail riding, I tend to prefer it a little bit better. But they're both excellent power steering platforms.
Yeah, I agree. The power steering on both of them is really, really good. The Honda has a little bit less assistance, which we tend to like. The Sportsman's a little bit more assistance, which is handy at slower speeds through the tighter sections, which is kind of the story across the lineup as far as power steering goes on the Polaris machines. But the power steering on the Honda has been really good. I really like the assistance. It's a nice sweet spot for trail riding.
Yep, seems to be just perfect. Yeah, the power steering on the Sportsman is almost effortless, very light.
Here's that same stretch again on the Rubicon. The stiffer steering effort on the Rubicon is what we prefer 90% of the time. It's only at the slower speeds and tight trails like this that the Sportsman EPS is better. That's mostly personal preference, but when we're going faster, the Sportsman EPS feels less predictable, and that's why we like the Rubicon's power steering better overall. Keep in mind, we're coming from a performance-oriented perspective. Lighter steering effort might be something that some consumers prefer depending on their needs.
This nice, wet, sloppy trail is a really good place to test the all-wheel drive system on the Sportsman and the four-wheel drive on the Rubicon. And this kind of stuff, this kind of riding, is really where the Polaris all-wheel drive system kind of excels. If you're not trying to pull through anything specific, just to maintain traction on slick trails, we really like Polaris's all-wheel drive system.
Just to be clear, the Rubicon has our preferred four-wheel drive system with a locking differential. This run is to demonstrate using all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive on a slick trail with minor obstacles. We would expect that if we push each system to its limit, the Rubicon's four-wheel drive would come out on top the majority of the time.
This stuff very, very easily. This four-wheeler has plenty of power for this kind of riding. And this all-wheel drive just carries it through this slick muck effortlessly. Okay, boys, same little run with the Honda. Four-wheel drive. It still maintains pretty light steering effort in four-wheel drive. You lose that on some machines, but Honda's four-wheel drive seems to be pretty good to just go out and ride in. Problem with spin or losing control. It's very, very planted. Very, very planted the way you would want it to be in some of these slicker conditions. And we're not putting it through at serious paces or anything, but to keep you centered and in control and tight on the trails, there's something to be said for that. And both of these machines do a really good job.
We didn't have these machines long enough to make any meaningful comparisons in terms of reliability, so we'll let owners have that fight down in the comments section. We appreciate you guys checking out the video. We'll see you next time, right here on Dirt Obsession.